Welcome to today's training hosted by Rails to Trails Conservancy Changemaker for Trails Initiative. My name is Isabel Lord. I'm the advocacy coordinator here at RTC, and I will be your presenter as well as your moderator for tonight's session. I am joined by my esteemed colleague and RTC's Senior Director of Programs, Eric Oberg. The topic for today's training is making your voice heard in shaping federal decisions. During this training, we will discuss the impact of current federal actions on trails and specific ways you can ensure your officials know that trails and trail networks are essential infrastructure. So first, I just wanted to thank everyone for being here today. Your work as Changemakers is totally crucial to advancing the walking, biking, and trails movement. For a little bit of background, RTC kicked off the Changemakers for Trails initiative about a year ago, last spring in March. And since then, we've held several trainings covering advocacy basics, the power of storytelling in advocacy, and the role that the federal government plays in funding and building trails. The overarching purpose of the initiative is to help trail lovers and users like yourself transform your passion for trails into impactful advocacy. As we continue our Changemakers journey, we want you to be comfortable advocating for trails in all spaces. We are in a pivotal moment where funding and support for walking, biking, and trails is lacking at the federal level. It is our job to work together and individually to advocate for trails at all levels of government. Your role as a changemaker, again, is crucial, and we at RTC are your partners in providing information, resources, and calls to action so that you can continue to use your voice effectively and the resources provided here to make the case for trails. So, why we're here and what we will cover today in this training. First, we want to recognize that this is an uncertain and very fluid time for funding and policy surrounding several issues, including walking, biking, and trails. The environment is ever-changing. There's new guidance released every day. It's very fast moving. I'll speak a little bit more to this moment in the next slide in the federal landscape. But just wanted to recognize this moment and the uncertainty that we are in. This training is a reminder that there are various ways you can have an impact with your federal decision makers and make the case for walking, biking, and trails. And my colleague Eric will kind of dive into the various ways you can do that. Oh, here we go. So as mentioned on the previous slide, there's a lot of uncertainty during this time. This slide ultimately demonstrates how quickly the federal landscape is evolving and why your consistent advocacy for trails can help cut through the noise. The pace of change has been rapid and the environment is fluid. So we wanted to highlight some top-line actions for the administration as well as other relevant policy movements at the federal level that have the potential to have a direct effect on trails, walking, and biking. As you may have heard, there's been some freezing and pausing of funds that affect trails, walking, and biking projects. And there has also been a court action in response to several memos and directives from the administration. The current review of grants by USDOT, as we understand it, is looking specifically at unobligated funds or grants that have not yet been funded. There may be a legal strategy needed, which we are paying attention to, but we will keep you informed moving forward. Earlier this month, new USDOT guidance was released that more explicitly targets trails and other walking and biking infrastructure as part of the ongoing review of grants the department previously awarded. This is when we need you to help us make the case that these investments are critical to the economy and quality life of communities across the country. Many of the actions and orders coming from Congress and the US Department of Transportation that you see on this timeline are ongoing and under consideration, making now an important time to use your voice and speak up for the trails in your community and tell your federal decision makers why they matter to you. So it's really important to reiterate that, and I've said this several times already, but it's important to keep in mind that new USDOT actions have been dynamic and fast acting regarding transportation funds, including trails and active transportation funding. The previous slide highlighted actions that have taken place recently at the federal level, which again makes this a unique time to influence federal decision making, which is why I'm glad you could all join us here tonight. Federal decisions regarding funding and policy affect the way walking, biking, and trail infrastructure is funded and built, because ultimately these decisions trickle down to on-the-ground built infrastructure that connects you to the people and places you care most about. I'll touch a bit more on this towards the end of the presentation, but I wanted to just note that a lot of consequential active transportation and funding changes will be decided in the next transportation federal reauthorization bill, which will be passed in 2026. Currently, we are under the Bipartisan Infrastructure Law, or the Infrastructure Investment and Jobs Act, under the Biden administration authorized, and there has been an unprecedented amount of funding for walking, biking, and trails. So as we kind of pivot into this new moment, it's important that we continue to advocate for trails as essential infrastructure and kind of listen to what the current administration is prioritizing. It's also important to recognize the key players in these federal decisions. You have Congress in the legislative branch, and the White House and USDOT and the executive branch, and they are constantly in communication and informing each other as they release this guidance and these various orders and directives and memos that affect walking, biking, and trails. So as we transition kind of from the conversation about the broader landscape of the current federal actions into the how-to of advocating, I wanted to make a note about important messaging tools that you can keep in mind as we go through the different types of advocacy. In many of the recent memos, orders, and general communications regarding transportation, Congress and the White House have emphasized their focus on economic impact, families, quality of life, and safety. In our September Changemakers training, Sending the Message That Trails Matter, we cover these benefits in detail. So I encourage you to watch the recording using the link in the chat. And I also encourage you to check out RTC's Active Transportation Transforms America report, because this report also outlines the benefits and is a great place to pull from if you need talking points or statistics. But we also encourage you to use local examples. If you have local examples about the return on investment in your specific community, or just the economic impact, how it's brought local tourism, or how it has really just drastically improved safety in your community, we encourage you to pull from those local examples as well. But if you don't have those, you are part of this larger collective of these benefits. So while transportation priorities have changed, one thing remains the same in all of our lives, and this is something that we need to keep top of mind as we're advocating. Trails and active transportation networks are essential infrastructure for America. They're important to the mobility and economy of America that we have safe access to walking, biking, and trails. In terms of economic development, the country's trail system already generates more than $34 billion in economic activity annually. And this number will continue to grow as this trail infrastructure is connected. These are significant investments back into the US economy, especially with the amount of federal funding that has gone to trails being only about $25 billion over the past 30 years. In terms of quality of life, people want to move places where they can access the outdoors and safely move around their community. Think about yourself, think about your family, your neighbors. What do you enjoy in your own neighborhood? You want a place where you can move freely and safely, and you can get exercise and just kind of, and also connect with others. You're connecting to nature, you're connecting with others. It's a great place to find community. Families want to live in vibrant places, and the emphasis right now is on healthier and safer communities for families and children. Communities are also centering their development strategy on quality of life, and trails can help communities attract workers and businesses to create a solid tax base that encourages continued growth. Regarding safety, safe routes to school are associated with reduced bike ped injuries and fatalities for school-age children. And the bigger picture is connected trail and active transportation infrastructure is crucial to addressing the epidemic we are living in, which is increased rates of bicycle and pedestrian fatalities. So like I said earlier, the administration and Congress they're communicating that these benefits matter to them. And it'll be crucial that these are kind of woven into your arguments as you kind of make the case for trails. But while all these points are important to keep in mind, at the end of the day, share your lived experience and why trails matter to you. Your members of Congress want you as their constituents. They want to know what you as their constituents care about and want to see supported on the federal level. I mentioned this before, but ultimately, federal decisions are so important for trails because they trickle down into the on the ground trail infrastructure that connects you to the people and places you care about. And with that, I will hand it over to my colleague, Eric Oberg, to discuss how to engage in the various types of advocacy.
Thank you, Isabel, and thank you to everyone that's joining us this afternoon and evening. I'm going to start with just an umbrella here, and this is really about our entire Changemaker series that we started last year, like Isabel said, and a huge, a big part of the rationale behind this series is to break down some of the barriers, and to share and hopefully grow the movement at a grassroots level of people that are willing to engage in advocacy. And when you hear the word advocacy, one thing I love to share with people is advocacy is just frankly a little bit fancier word than conversation. Advocacy is just having a discussion with somebody. It's a targeted discussion. It's about a specific topic, but advocacy really is just talking. It may be talking to one person, it might be talking to a room of people, but advocacy is just a discussion. And you're all here because you have some interest. I'd like to presume you have more than just an interest. You have, a real, uh, a real love for walking, biking, and trails. So when we're talking about advocacy here, we are talking about you talking about something that you love to do, right? So you're just sharing something that you have a real affinity for. Um, and there's all kinds of advocacy. I'm going to talk about these three different buckets of advocacy. But think about this. Advocacy does not have, these aren't in any sort of hierarchy here. One of these is not better or more effective than another. There are different times and different reasons that each of these pieces of advocacy might be the right one or might be the most effective. But I can tell you that I have seen and experienced just everyday advocacy that has been much more effective than some of the highest level direct advocacy meetings that I've been a part of. So don't think that these are somehow, that any type of advocacy is more important than the other. It's an ecosystem of discussion, right? And advocacy happens all the time, every day. And you are probably engaging in advocacy almost every day, whether you have ever labeled it that way or ever thought of it that way. And that's kind of what I want to get through in a lot of what I'm talking about, is helping you to diagnose where and when you can engage in advocacy and recognize where you've been doing it without ever labeling it such, right? So everyday advocacy, this is really the kind of interactions that you're going to have on a daily basis. And maybe you won't have all of these every single day, but you're going to have at least one of them every day, right? It could go from sharing things on social media, to just having a discussion with friends, family, community members. And what this really is you sharing. And again, you may not recognize it as advocacy, but if you share your interest in or your use of or your care about walking, biking, and trails with somebody, you tell somebody in a social setting, that, man, you and your family really love going out on your local trail, or, hey, man, I've been loving my exercise routine. It's included this, X mile bike ride 3 times a week, and the trail we have here in town is the perfect place for it. You probably feel like you're just talking about life, and you are. You're also creating a network of advocacy, right? You may be introducing people in your community to the fact that you have this amazing resource that they didn't know about. Or you may be talking to somebody who, at some level, makes decisions and they go, God, I didn't even think of trails being used in that way or that it impacted people in that certain way. So, those everyday interactions and the way that you share the things you care about are absolute advocacy. And again, sometimes the most important, right? And then you have community advocacy. And this is where you probably have a little bigger crowd than your one-on-one or your family and friends discussions, right? And it may be planned activities. There's so many things that happen out there, right? And not all of them are targeted. Don't think that that community advocacy can only happen at a gathering that is focused on walking, biking, trails, active transportation. It might be the 4th of July picnic in your town. It might be the Memorial Day parade. It might be the Easter egg hunt that you take your kids, the community Easter egg hunt. I mean, it runs the gamut, right? Your communities probably have a plethora of really amazing community events. And that may just be a place where you're networking and you're engaging in this everyday advocacy piece. Or it might be a place where you can where you have the opportunity to get a little more feedback or a little more buy-in. Maybe you or your local organization has a table there, and maybe there's a local ask, whether it's a petition or a sign-on letter or things like that. But look at the ecosystem of community events that are happening in and around your town, your community, and think about how those are those are opportunities for enlarged engagement, right? And then you have direct advocacy, and this is what everybody usually goes right to. When you hear the word advocacy, most people immediately think of scheduling a meeting with some sort of elected official in their office, and you are going there to sit down in a somewhat formal setting and have a discussion about, a certain issue. And that's great, and that is what it is, right? And it can be extremely effective. But again, I don't think that that is the only effective kind of advocacy. It can be super effective and it's super important. But I also want you to think about all three of these at different levels. That community advocacy piece, make sure you're inviting your elected officials, local, state, federal, all of these things. You can have that engagement all over. The other thing to think about in that direct advocacy, whether it's at the local, whether it's at the state, whether it's at the federal level, think about who is coming with you. And I'll talk a little bit more about that. The difference between message and messengers, right? The other piece of direct advocacy that can hit a wider audience than than a meeting in an office. Think about your letters to the editor, think about outreach to the press and being able to hit a lot wider audience with the message you're trying to get out there. Next slide, please. Here's a great example of community advocacy, right? And I'm going to have another slide right after this. If you don't know about Celebrate Trails Day, I'm going to tell you a little bit more about it. This is every fourth Saturday in April. It's a national celebration of your local trails. This is something Rails to Trails Conservancy has sponsored and helped uplift now for over a decade. Super accessible. These events, there are hundreds of events all over the country on Celebrate Trails Day. And some of them are big productions that have tens of thousands of people that come. And some of them are a dozen folks just meeting up to go take a walk or a bike ride or do a little trail cleanup around their favorite trail or trailhead. There is no right or wrong. There is no prescription for what kind of event counts as a Celebrate Trails Day event. It is literally open to anything and anybody anywhere. So I'd like to encourage you to go look and see, is there a Celebrate Trails Day event already planned? You can check that out on our Celebrate Trails Day page and see what events are already registered and planned. If there's something happening locally, just plan on attending. And while you're planning on attending, invite all your friends and family to attend too, right? If there's nothing close, it's not too late to have your own event. And we have created a plethora of materials. I know there's a link in the chat now for the toolkit, and if you get in there, there are so many materials available to you that help you promote and build up your Celebrate Trails Day event and try to get as many people out as you can. And then I'm going to give this Cleveland example. Good friends of mine up in Cleveland, the advocacy organization up there, Bike Cleveland, as well as so many public agencies and really just the general public in Cleveland itself. Great, great, great biking city. They've taken advantage of Celebrate Trails Day to create some real community advocacy. They started a few years ago taking Celebrate Trails Day not just as a single day, but as a kickoff to a whole series of different events that happen throughout the summer, and they call it Biking with a Mayor. And the first Bike with a Mayor event always kicks off on Celebrate Trails Day. And it's turned into this amazing series of events around the greater Cleveland and Cuyahoga County area where different mayors from different communities host a bike ride. And they invite the other mayors and they invite other leaders and they invite the general public to come on a certain day and go for a bike ride with them. And they just check out the cool local infrastructure. They also check out what's missing so that they can be better leaders and advocates for helping fill in the blanks. But just another example where a community event is being mixed with really good advocacy. Next slide, please. Here's just another general slide on Celebrate Trails Day. I can't emphasize enough what a cool opportunity this is for you to either participate in, or I really do hope you think about, if nothing's happening in your community, think about organizing your own event. There again, there's no event too big or too small. It could be just you and your family going out there and inviting anyone else that wants to join you for a bike ride or a walk on the trail. That's all it has to be. And I'm telling you, that really can lead to some serious buy-in and participation. You might surprise yourself. Put it out there. Invite your community to go on a walk or a bike ride on Celebrate Trails Day. Use some of the tools that we have available to you to promote that and see how many people show up. You might surprise yourself. Next slide, please. All right, how do we talk about infusing this advocacy into your organizing, right? Engaging those elected officials. And again, at every level, your local, your state, your federal. I know I've been at this for almost 20 years, and I know people who are not, where advocacy is not part of your job. And I know that's probably almost all of you, right? When advocacy is not part of your job, when regular engagement with elected officials is not something that you do on a regular basis, I've seen where there's a level of almost intimidation, or you feel like you're bothering them if you reach out to your elected official and invite them to something or see if they're available. Let me be super clear to you. You as a constituent are doing elected officials a huge, huge, huge favor by identifying places they can come engage with constituents. You are not burdening them. I can't emphasize that enough. You're doing them a favor by telling them that there is a place where they're being invited to come engage with constituents. And there's nothing better than inviting them outside on a trail with people who love this kind of infrastructure and going for a walk or going for a bike ride. So do not be hesitant to reach out to them. You are absolutely not burdening them. You're doing them a favor. So please invite them. Think about these events, and as early as you possibly can, do outreach. These folks are typically fairly busy. And certainly when you are talking about, depending on the size of your state, but certainly at the federal level, they're not always back in the community, right? At the federal level, they've got recess from both the House and Senate at different times. But just know that you've got to do some upfront. You've got to get those invitations out as early as you possibly can to get on their schedule. And then when you do have these community events, whether or not you have an elected official there, right? Just because they're not there doesn't mean you can't infuse some of this community advocacy. Whether it's a postcard writing station, maybe there's a petition. We have one right now. I know Isabel talked about it. I'm going to say it again. What's happening at the federal level is we are in for a big advocacy push, right? We have a lot of things happening right now with the reauthorization of the transportation bill, which is going to set the funding levels for this kind of work for the next 6 years. We have a lot of work to do, and our collective voices are more important now than they've probably ever been. And we have a sign-on letter for local elected officials and for chambers of commerce and business associations. And your help in getting that petition out or getting that sign-on letter out to those people is a huge action. And I know that's going to come up later, but I want to say that. But think about how you have ways that people coming to your community events can make their voices heard to elected officials. It's great if the elected official can be at the event, but if not, that doesn't mean you still can't have that collective impact. So think of ways to do that. Next slide, please. And how about this outreach, right? And this is again all levels of government, and then also to agencies. This is state and federal agencies, right? And so when we say US DOT right now is central to the kind of outreach we're making, but at different times and for different reasons, your state DOTs, your state DNRs, but just thinking about public agency outreach, right? This is where we start talking about message versus messenger, right? So start engaging those local leaders, whether they don't have to be elected leaders. Elected leaders are great. They certainly can be, right? But who are the business leaders in your community? Who are parts of your local chambers of commerce? Do you have faith leaders in your community who understand these issues? Like, who are the people in your community that people listen to? Who are those leaders from all aspects of life, right? And I do think sometimes, especially on the issue of walking, biking, and trails, that we may immediately think about, oh, business leaders because of the economic impact of trails, and saying chambers of commerce for a little bit the same reason. But think about your Think about school administrators, think about teachers, think again about the faith community, people that care about the safety of your community, people that care about how children and the elderly and everybody else moves around safely in your community. And do they understand the importance of walking, biking, and trail infrastructure in that safe, high quality of life that you're trying to create in your community? Think of those people, right? Everybody in a leadership position in your community should be a supporter and should be a messenger for what we're trying to do here. Think outside the box sometimes around the right messengers. And I also don't want to overemphasize every person has a voice and every voice is important, right? And so this isn't about, hey, the only person that can talk to your elected officials is, somebody that has some sort of leadership standing. That's not true. I truly believe in the power of the grassroots. But I do think that we'd be naive if we aren't building messengers out of local leaders. It needs to be both. It needs to be numbers, and it needs to be both the quantity from the grassroots and the right messenger. So you can work on parallel tracks there. The other thing that Isabel said, and this is extremely important in the moment that we are in, um, what is happening at the federal level around the existing federal funding and the review that is happening at the US DOT. They are looking at all of these funding programs that fund walking, biking, and trails. And they are reviewing those programs and this is their nomenclature, to ensure that those programs fit within the priorities of the administration. We are extremely confident that walking, biking, and trails deliver the outcomes that fit well within the priorities of the administration. Our collective job, all of you on this call, Rails to Trails Conservancy staff, every advocate in this country that cares about these issues, our number one job right now is to be talking to leadership at all levels of government and explaining to them why walking, biking, and trails and why this work fits into the priorities of the administration. It delivers on economic development. It delivers on high quality of life. It delivers on safe communities. These are priorities of this administration. And this work delivers on those priorities. That is literally the job we have. We have got to connect those dots to the administration. So your outreach to all of these people is essentially that trail funding is essential. Trails are essential to these key priorities that you have, that your local community has, and that this administration has. Our collective priorities are the same as the administration when it comes to outcomes for this kind of infrastructure, and we have to educate them on that. Edu Advocacy and education are also the same, right? We're just trying to educate them. Next slide, please. So what can you do? Actions you can take. Um, Encourage your local elected officials and chambers of commerce to sign on to that US DOT letter. Again, this is a very focused letter, a super focused letter to US DOT from local elected officials and chambers of commerce and business groups. So take a look at that sign in, and please, if you can help, if you have personal contacts, if you have other people that you know and work with that have personal contacts with local electeds and chambers and business associations, please share that sign-on letter. The deadline for that is the 31st of this month. Time is not on our side with any of this. Everything is happening quickly, and we need to make our voices heard and impact soon, right? Send messages to your local, state, and federal elected officials. Tell them why this matters and tell them that this infrastructure fits absolutely seamlessly into the priorities of this administration. Um, Look for Celebrate Trails Day events, right? I'll say it again. Take a peek, see if something's happening around you. If it is, show up. Invite friends and family, invite everybody to come with you. If it isn't, it's not too late. Do your own. Be a leader. Have your own Celebrate Trails Day event. And then look for opportunities to meet with your elected officials. If you don't have a local advocacy group or somebody that you have done joint meetings with before, You don't have to, right? You can reach out. You can reach out to their district staff. You can reach out directly and say you want to meet with them. You have something really important you want to talk to them about. Again, it's great if you have support, if you have other people, if you have an organization locally that is already doing this or would want to do this. That's great. It's not a prerequisite. You don't have to be a part of something bigger or some larger group to request a meeting with your local, state, or federal elected official. It is more than just a right. You absolutely have every reason to reach out and request a meeting. So don't feel like that needs to be done by somebody else for you. You can do it for yourself. And organizations like RTC is here to arm you with all of the information you need to go into those meetings feeling like you are an informed advocate. And the fact that you're here tonight tells me that you have you have the interest, and really that's all it takes. If you have the interest, you have the ability to be an informed and an effective advocate. Isabel, I think I'm passing to you.
Thank you, Eric. I love that point you just made. If you have the interest, you have the ability. And the earlier point you made about advocacy being a conversation, it can seem very intimidating. And a lot of people do think that direct advocacy is the only advocacy. But ultimately, it is kind of having a conversation. When you break it down and think about it like that, you're already doing it every day. So just kind of continuing those conversations with people that you see every day, but also kind of making the effort to then have these meetings and talk to your local elected officials and invite them to community events. That is so pivotal and crucial during this moment, because we need trails walking and biking to continue to be supported and funded at the federal level. So just a few takeaways from the training before we jump into some Q&A. I've said this again and again, but the landscape is evolving quickly. We are living in uncertain times. However, we must remain consistent in our support for trails and the message that trail and active transportation infrastructure are essential infrastructure in America. As you continue to make the case for this infrastructure, elevate the economic development, quality of life, and safety benefits of these trail and active transportation networks. We strongly encourage you to engage with your federal decision makers and to consider whether your local and state elected officials or business leaders could be helpful in making the case. Eric made that great point about there's the message and then there are the messengers. And while your elected officials want to hear from you, it's also worth thinking about how you can convey a message through various different viewpoints to let them know that a lot of different members of the community, no matter what their kind of stake in the community is, have an interest in trail and active transportation network, and it benefits them. If you're interested in engaging in more direct advocacy and organizing meetings with your members of Congress, please fill out the Microsoft form in the chat, and we will be in touch. And I touched on this briefly earlier, but as we're thinking kind of in the long term about how we're influencing federal decisions, we had the federal transportation bill, which will be renewed in 2026. We are currently working to influence this bill, and decisions are being made this summer and fall about how all types of transportation will be prioritized and funded. So while advocacy is necessary at all times to maintain momentum for the walking, biking, and trails movement, it's an important time to take action and make the case for trails to your decision makers that funding is available for trails and active transportation in the next 5 to 10 years. If we want to see our active transportation infrastructure prioritized, we need to use our collective voice to emphasize its importance to communities nationwide. And with that, it looks like we have some questions. So I'll just go ahead and take this down. And let's see what we have here. Okay. Oh, this is a really good one. Why is bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure under scrutiny right now? Why is it being viewed as a partisan issue? What can we do about it? Thank you for this question. Yes, bicycle infrastructure is facing some additional scrutiny right now. As I mentioned earlier, the March 12th memo added bicycle and pedestrian infrastructure language to the kind of list of language targets for grants that are under review that have already been awarded. So it is facing a little bit of additional scrutiny right now. However, RTC is working deeply with members of Congress and USDOT to make clear that this infrastructure is nonpartisan and essential to the economy and well-being of communities nationwide. At the same time, we need you, our grassroots members, to be elevating the importance of trails, walking, and biking to their local, state, and federal officials. This is a very critical moment to elevate the positive impact of trails and trail networks as the actions being taken against this infrastructure are still in a review stage. They're ongoing. They're under consideration. So it really creates a timely moment to make the case. And as the situation continues to evolve, so will the actions we need to take. So it's a very fluid environment, and we appreciate you helping us kind of navigate it as we move forward. Eric, do you have anything to add to that?
Yeah. I guess the other thing I'll say is I hope that all of us that are joined here tonight do realize that trails, walking, and biking is not a partisan issue, should not be a partisan issue. And but it is also not the only issue right now at the federal level that that is a nonpartisan issue that's being put under scrutiny. That doesn't make any of you or us feel better, but I think we do need to realize that there's a long list of issues that are being scrutinized at the federal level that traditionally, and I think still today, are nonpartisan issues. And so I think just to reemphasize what we've been saying throughout this training, um, they have not, biking and walking funding, trail funding has not been eliminated. It has not been cut. Right now, the current situation is that it is under review by the USDOT to ensure that it fits the priorities of the administration. So I just want to reemphasize our job, our collective job, is to let leaders know at all levels of government how important this is and that it absolutely fits the priorities. Help them do the review. Our job could be summed up in help USDOT do their review. And the answer to that review is, oh, trails, walking, and biking absolutely fit the priorities of this administration, so we should continue funding them the way that we have. That's our job today and in the coming weeks. And it's probably never been more important.
That's a fantastic point, Eric. We have another good question. I know both of my senators, my representatives, and my local officials are supporters of spending on bicycling. What methods exist to influence decisions apart from talking with these officials? So I will say that this is really where building the groundswell of dialogue and support is super, super critical. A lot of issues, as Eric was just saying, a lot of issues are kind of under a microscope right now. And it's kind of hard to break through with the message of there's this loss, there is so much loss. While that is absolutely true, it's really crucial that we elevate the positive impact of trails and how they make a difference in communities, and demonstrating the ways that trails, walking, and biking are directly contributing to, again, economic opportunity, safety, and quality of life. And this is also somewhere where I'll say that it's really crucial that you bring other people into this conversation. You can advocate as an individual, but our collective advocacy, doing all the types of advocacy, everyday, community, direct, is really what's going to move the needle and help us defend and really support walking, biking, and trails as we move forward. So, Eric, do you want to
Yeah,
add
yeah.
anything to that?
I hear this a lot, and right now, in the moment that we are in, it's never been more important. My elected officials tell me that they support walking, biking, and trails. They tell me they support funding walking, biking, and trails. In fact, they may have a history of voting for certain bills or certain actions that show support for walking, biking, and trails. That's great. What your job is thank them for their support if that's the case, and then inform them. And this is where we want to be a good partner with you, right? We can give you the information that you need to take to them. There are actions they can take today that are not just words, but some of them are just words, but it's where those words are being directed. And these are actions that your elected officials can take. If they are local or state, have them sign the sign-on letter. That's an action they can take. If they believe in this funding, if they believe in walking, biking, and trails, ask them to sign that sign-on letter. If they're federal officials, ask them to let the US DOT know that walking, biking, and trails are essential to the US DOT's focus and funding, and that they absolutely fit the priorities of this administration. We want every congressman, every congresswoman, and every senator reaching out to the US DOT and telling them, hey, I know you're doing this review of all funding programs, and we just want to let you know how essential walking, biking, and trails are to our communities and our constituencies, and how they absolutely fit the priorities of this administration. So we just want to help you in your review process. Those are actions they can take. And then in the coming months, later this summer and into the fall and new year, the new transportation reauthorization bill that is going to set funding levels for the next 6 years is going to be debated in Congress. Your federal elected officials, if they support walking, biking, and trails, they absolutely need to support the funding of the walking and biking and trail programs within the US DOT in that federal transportation reauthorization. So it's wonderful that if they have a history of support, they need to now, they've got to step up. There's actions they can take. Words are wonderful, but at that level, we need action. And so get them to reach out to USDOT, inform them, they should know already, that the new transportation bill is going to start being debated this summer, and they all have a role in making sure that bill continues investing in this essential infrastructure. So those are actions they can take. If you need more direct information on what those talking points look like, what exactly you need to say, that's what we're here for. We're here to make sure you have good information to share.
Absolutely. Thank you, Eric. So I think we have reached the end of our questions. So I am just going to highlight a few. Well, let's see if the PowerPoint wants to work. There we go. It's just a little bit behind. So what's next in terms of your journey as a change maker for Trails? As we've mentioned during the session, you can take action today, use social media, write letters to the editor, and again, emphasize the positive impact of Trails on communities. You can attend community meetings. You can organize events on the trail. Like we mentioned, Celebrate Trails Day is a great opportunity to engage with your community around trails, walking, and biking, and invite your elected officials. As Eric mentioned, Cleveland's done an amazing job of engaging elected officials. They've done Bike with the Mayor, and they use Celebrate Trails Day to kick off an entire series of advocacy events, and it's really fantastic. So I believe we also have a blog link about Cleveland that was dropped in the chat. So really encourage you to check that out as well to learn more about what they've been doing. Yes, organize events on the trail, Celebrate Trails Day, meet with elected officials and leaders. We'll have additional trainings and kind of calls to action through email this year. We also have case studies of success on our website, so encourage you to check out our Changemakers page. And again, the direct advocacy sign-on form if you're interested in setting up meetings with your members of Congress in their local or state offices. Let us know, sign up, use this form. We will be in touch. We will help you kind of set up these meetings. If you need some guidance, we'll help you with talking points. We're here to support you in this journey as a change maker as we continue to navigate the movement as well. Again, webinars, blogs, our RTC's website is a treasure trove of knowledge and resources, and just have fun picking and choosing from every single part, from the trail development, from federal funding, from advocating. There's so much to learn from the website, and so we encourage you to check that out as well.